Hey guys, can you believe we're in week 6? Alright, day 1. Our reading passage is called Naturally Selected to Survive by Michael Stahl. The earth has changed over and over again throughout the course of its history. Some of these changes have happened quickly, others have occurred over long stretches of time. For example, the planet has experienced ice ages that took place over thousands of years. During those eras, huge sheets of ice covered much of the surface of the globe. Then, for a few thousand years between the ice ages, the Earth warmed up. Scientists believe that this cycle has actually occurred a few times. As the planet goes through this cycle, environments may go through changes. In order to survive in changing environments, species oftentimes must undergo a process of adaptation. Adaptation refers to a mutation or a genetic change that enables an organism, such as an animal or plant, to survive in its environment. This trait is passed down from one generation to the next, becoming an inherited trait of the species. A species may have to adapt to warmer temperatures, increased precipitation, or even developing air pollution. If the organisms of a species cannot change along with the area in which they live, they risk dying out. Though an uncountable number of species that have roamed the earth have become extinct, the planet has seen many others adapt as well. These select organisms have been able to go on living in their environment. A species adapts to a changing environment as organisms with favorable traits reproduce and survive. These favorable traits, which help the species survive, are passed down through different generations of the species. This process is called natural selection. Recent history has given us an important example of how organisms are able to survive once their environment changes. Light gray peppered moths and dark-colored peppered moths live in the countryside between the cities of Manchester and London in England. Many years before the 19th century, more of the light gray peppered moths had been able to survive in the environment, mostly because of their color. Their thin layer of skin, as well as their large wings, was mostly gray with a little bit of black peppered all around. This color was advantageous because the light gray peppered moths were camouflaged when they stayed on gray-colored areas on the sides of trees in their habitat. Predators, which were mostly birds, could not see the light-colored moths on the trees because the color of the moths blended in with the color of the trees. Instead, the predators were able to see the dark-colored peppered moths more easily. In the early 19th century, though, England began the first years of its Industrial Revolution. Many areas, especially in and between the cities of Manchester and London, became populated by a growing number of factories. This was because companies began to use a lot of new machinery that had been invented in the decades before. These machines made work a lot easier in many ways. The companies could build more products faster than ever before. However, many of these factories needed coal to provide energy for the machines. When coal burns, it gives off a lot of dark-colored smoke. Soot is a black substance that collects on surfaces that comes into contact with the smoke. Smoke's dark particles stick onto surfaces like paint. In the English countryside near industrialized areas, the trees began to blacken with soot because of all of the smoke in the air from the factories. This made the light gray peppered moths much more valuable. My husband's building a bench. Predators could see them on the trees more clearly and easily hunt them down. Sometime in the next 100 years, scientists began to notice a huge change in the moth population living in and between the cities of Manchester and London, near where many of those factories had been constructed. Most of the peppered moths were the dark-colored kind. What caused this change was the fact that predators had eaten a lot of the light gray peppered moths because the moths were clearly visible on the black-colored trees. The dark-colored peppered moths in the area survived much more easily and mated with other dark-colored peppered moths until most of the population of peppered moths became dark-colored. Many scientists feel that this example of evolution is a species in a species supports Charles Darwin's theory of natural selection. An author named J.W. Tutt published a report about the moths a few years after Darwin's death, writing that the change in the peppered moth population seemed to support Darwin's idea. Though Darwin was not alive to read the Tutt report, his teachings about nature live on. Hopefully you heard all that. If not, let me know. I'll re-record it. Stand by for vocabulary.